The biggest challenge for me with change in any business, and technology is no different, is people give up too quick. And never give up. Never give up. Technology is never perfect. New technology will come along, new upgrades will come along, but never give up. Just keep pursuing.
Techsauce Global, sparking innovative thoughts. สวัสดีค่ะ Hello and welcome to another edition of Techsauce Global Podcast with me, Chawarat Yongjiranun Erpupe, the Techsauce Global Content Editor, with you always on our podcast conversations where we seek to find insight in various industries and sectors, not only here in Thailand, but also in Southeast Asia. Today, we're going to take a look at FoodTech. And one of the biggest companies that has been leading the trends that we're seeing here in the region is Express Food Group, or EFG, which is a partner of choice for many corporates for being a leader in food and beverage brands in Southeast Asia. For example, we have Minor Group and Food and Passion Group, which has worked with them. So today, we're going to talk with Martin Darby, the managing director of EFG Holdings, who has joined the group since, I believe, 2019. He can correct me if I'm wrong. And he is responsible for the EFG business in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, plus Palms Airport, F&B Singapore. Sawadee Martin. Hello.
Hi, good morning to you.
Did I get that right?
You did indeed, yes.
But it's going to be very interesting to talk to you today because we're going to dive right into something that everyone comes into contact with, and that is food and how it's changing, how it's being serviced, the technology that's coming into the industry. But before we get into the technological side of it and your insight into the industry, tell us about yourself. It's very interesting how we've seen your business journey come into this region, especially since you've had experience in leadership positions in giant corporations overseas.
That's absolutely right. I actually started my career working in kitchens of a celebrity chef's father's restaurant in the United Kingdom. The celebrity chef being
really?
Jamie Oliver, who I think many people in this part of the world will know. So, yes, I've worked in a variety of businesses, but always consumer-facing and always multi-site operations. So I've worked for companies like Marks and Spencer in the retail space. I've worked for Vodafone in the telecommunications space. I've even worked for a fitness company, but all different businesses, and of course, an eclectic range of F&B, of which probably the most famous around the world is Starbucks coffee. So I am the guy that helped to bring Starbucks to the United Kingdom, opening the first 200 stores way back at the turn of the millennium. So an exciting journey. But as I say, in common, they are all customer facing. They are all multi-site with all the challenges and excitement that comes from that type of operation.
So how did you find yourself being the manager director of EFG Holdings?
Oh, I've been living here in Southeast Asia since around 2006. I've worked in Singapore, in Indonesia, Vietnam, and I was running at the time a business in Vietnam and saw this opportunity to work with some absolutely fabulous brands. And you mentioned some of our franchise partners, people like Minor Foods International Group, International Dairy Queen, Krispy Kreme International, Food Passion Group. And, I've loved brands. I'm a follower of brands. And I love F&B. And you mentioned earlier how we all interact with F&B. And here, is a group of some of the best and well-known and loved brands in the world, and an opportunity to work with countries and markets that are starting to explore and get to know these brands. And I just felt it was perfect timing, and I jumped at the opportunity.
Okay, and a very interesting time as well. We'll get into that. But you, as you mentioned, you've worked with big brands like Starbucks Coffee, Marks and Spencer. Obviously, you've probably learned a lot from your experiences in these big corporations. Can you share with us some of the key lessons you learned?
Oh, I think some of the lessons are universal and they're not necessarily unique to our business or even necessarily the businesses I work for. When you work in a business like the F&B business, it's a very people-centric business. And therefore, I think it's absolutely critical when you join these businesses that you listen, that you
Ah,
spend time.
yes.
I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that I used to work in kitchens. I make a point of spending time in the stores, trying the food, talking to the people, helping in the kitchens, exploring, visiting the factories, going to our warehouses, because that is a way you learn. Because, whilst all the businesses have a lot in common, there are unique cultural differences, there are unique company differences, there are unique often process and different ways of doing things in terms of a business. And, it is so important to come in with an open mind, but definitely listening, observing, watching, working alongside the people before you make the big strategic decisions. And, I think we've all seen companies and worked in companies where sometimes people rush to make the decision. And there's often pressure in company to make a decision. But,
Yeah.
I think that induction time, that first 100 days, and then constantly refreshing that knowledge, because the knowledge you gained when you saw the insights you saw when you first joined a company need to be kept up to date. It's like a data file. You need to keep it up to date. You can't rely on your experience of some time in the past. And we'll come on, I'm sure, and talk about the experience of the last couple of years. But, there's been a constant need to keep refreshed with the environment with which we work and the impact it's having on our businesses.
Okay, now I'm definitely I have to ask you about this, and I'm sure I kind of skipped over a bit, but the fact that you mentioned that you started off in the kitchen is probably something that's very interesting to our listeners,
Mhm.
because it's a big jump, right? From working in the kitchen to, like, being a very high profile leader in a corporate position. How did you make that jump, or how was that possible?
Okay, so I was working in kitchens part-time whilst I was studying. So I did go to university. I did my exams as well. But I think it's that combination of university of life and university of study that is important. And I've not only worked in kitchens, but I've worked behind bars. I've been a postman for a while.
Wow.
I actually enjoy doing things and learning from those experiences. And I think, what you find is you find reflexive time, you find that you learn a lot, and I know there's lots of famous programs where the boss goes undercover.
Yeah.
I haven't gone undercover. I've been above cover. Everybody knows what I do. And we have the 1st of May is International Labour Day, and here in Express Food Group we make it EFG Day. And on EFG Day, us, the management, actually spend the day doing the jobs of our people, working alongside them. And we'll come on and talk, I'm sure. We're now in the delivery business, so that includes me dressing up in the gear, taking the satchel, the bag, and delivering the product to our consumers, as well as helping in the kitchens and, as I say, in our factories. And I think that's important. I think it's important from a team morale point of view. But critically, it's also important in terms of learning the small nuances and challenges that often our frontline workers face. And they're not always obvious from looking at the numbers or through looking at a spreadsheet. And that is where experience and working alongside people really is important and helpful.
When people are growing in their careers, right? Of course, this is for those who want to better themselves and develop themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, there are big challenges that they have to face.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have obviously, tried and did different positions in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and have made mistakes, or have
Sure.
to had
Yes.
those moments where you've had to make some important decisions on where your career will head to. What were some of the biggest challenges for your personal career? I mean, like how did you navigate?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I have a long career, spanning probably 30 plus years, but some of the biggest challenges have actually been, to be honest, in the last 2 years,
Mm,
because none of us in any industry have had to face a crisis that has no end, or hopefully it has
mhm,
an end now, but at the time had no particular end, and a crisis that was very fast unraveling on multiple. Locations, multiple platforms, multiple aspects of the business, some supply chain issues caused by the pandemic, to the obvious one of, our employees and making sure they were kept safe, to actually the physical restrictions that were imposed quite understandably by governments in countries where we worked, where we couldn't move from one part of a city to another. We couldn't resupply our restaurants. We couldn't move our employees. We couldn't deliver to our customers. So I think the last couple of years have probably been some of the most challenging, and including on a personal front. I'm a very hands-on manager. I like to spend time with my people. I have not been able to travel to Laos or to Myanmar to see my team now for 2 years. That
mhm,
pains me.
mhm,
That's
mhm.
that's difficult for me. I also haven't been able to travel as frequently as I would normally do to Singapore to see my daughters and family. So, there have been personal challenges that everybody's faced, obviously, during the last couple of years, but also, business challenges that we'd never faced before.
Mm,
I'll be honest with you, we had a crisis management plan. I've experienced over the years terrible crises in different businesses, but we'd never had a crisis quite like the
like,
COVID-19 pandemic. And
oh,
it's
and yeah.
the fact that it really tested, I think, all of us, but in some ways also brought us together, because, when there is no precedent, you have to make a precedent, and you make a precedent by spending time with people, by learning how to use Zoom, Skype, Teams, and other ways. We managed to bring all our training online pretty quickly. We managed to start to introduce video auditing of store. We rapidly adopted smartphone auditing because we
Mhm,
physically couldn't go to the stores. So
yeah.
therefore, you have to find another way to keep your business going. And that means being creative. That means testing ideas. And, you said in your question about, challenges and things that didn't work. Some of the ideas we didn't work. That is the reality of life. But,
Yeah.
the important thing is to keep trying, to keep learning, and to, try and stay ahead of the curve. But, it's been challenging. But nothing like as challenging as obviously has been for many people that work for us and many of our customers as well.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear that, you've had to be apart from your family there. But yeah, from listening to you, definitely one of the key aspects is that maybe people can take away is that you really have to be flexible, right?
Yes.
You have to be willing to change. As you said, you're very comfortable being hands-on, and then you just had to change, and I think that's one of the key things. And one of the changes that we're seeing is food tech.
Yes.
As technology, as you mentioned, technology is coming into play more and more into the food industry. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience of what you've observed in terms of how the food tech landscape has been in the CLMVT?
Yes, I mean, probably in many ways, one of the most noticeable changes that has impacted our business, but it is quite revolutionary when you think back on it, is, 2 years ago, 2019, before the COVID crisis, we were predominantly a cash business. Our customers paid cash in virtually
Mm-hmm.
all the countries where we trade. Cash was still king. Today, probably half of our customers pay through digital payments. Now, that's a
Mm.
phenomenal revolutionary change in quite a short period of time. It obviously impacts the amount of cash we have on site, which is obviously a positive. But it also changes our back office systems as well, because you've got a lot more digital payments. So, that would be a very, very obvious example of a change. Another one has been the growth and use of QR codes. A few
Yes.
years ago, QR codes was something we were dabbling with. We weren't sure whether the consumer would adopt it. Now, it's not, it's definitely not uncommon that people come in and know how to scan. They will use a digital menu rather than a physical menu. And, we're using QR codes on many of our marketing materials now, which we wouldn't have thought of a couple of years ago because it's become the norm. So I think, they're very much things that have been pushed at us. The customers themselves have embraced the revolution, if you like, and changed. But there are many things we've also been working on behind the scenes. And, one of them back in 2019, we could already tell that the delivery landscape was changing. And one of our key brands is the pizza company. So we've always been in pizza delivery. But we could see that people were starting to order, and there was demand for more products than pizza for home delivery. And we could see the growth of Foodpanda, Deliveroo, Grab, and other aggregators in the market. So we took the bold decision in early 2020 that we would become an aggregator rather than a pizza delivery business. And we launched an e-commerce business in December 2020 called Hungry. That business last year had over 200,000 subscribers, turned over about $1 million, and is a fast-growing business. Now, that business, to me, has no bricks and mortar restaurants or F&B. It is a e-commerce business. We have a ghost kitchen. We have virtual brands like Eat Together, brands that we've created with our own chefs. And, we're delivering products, multiple combined deliveries across now the whole of Cambodia, also in Laos, and recently launched in Myanmar. So that's a way we've embraced, if you like, apps as a way of also changing the whole dynamic of our business to become much more omni-channel in our approach. Now, what we've seen in the last quarter is about 20% of people using the app, not for delivery, but for pickup. So now that app is starting to change behavior. So here in Cambodia, instead of picking up the phone to the call center, you're now booking your takeaway through the app. So, that is quite a fundamental change in the structure of our organization, the back office systems required, but being led very much by a consumer trend, and hopefully Express Food Group, EFG, is at the forefront of that. So that's sort of one area. One final area I'll share with you is smartphone auditing. We, like many retailers, have always audited our business. You would expect us to. We're required to. We're a franchisee. But it would have been a very traditional audit done with pen and paper, clipboards going around kitchens and restaurant areas. And we decided at the end of 2020 that we would move that into a smartphone format. So now all our teams use a smartphone. It's geo ring fence, so they can't do the audit sitting at home. They have to physically be at the location. And the audit is very smart. So, it will say to you things like, what is the fridge temperature? They record the fridge temperature. It will then say, please photograph the fridge temperature. So there's a check and balance. And also there is a requirement to go back into that system and correct any issues that aren't right. So if there's any issues that are not compliant, if there's maintenance work that needs doing, they need to physically go back into the smartphone and confirm that it's done. And that confirmation includes photographic or video and signature evidence as well. So now we have a situation where actually, without traveling to Siem Reap, to Poi Phet, to any of these provincial cities, I have a much clearer view of how my business is doing, including video and photographic evidence. And, I'm able to reassure Minor Foods, International Dairy Queen, all my franchisors that I have a much more robust QA system, a quality assurance system. And in a way, the pandemic encourages us to do that because we weren't able to go and check people's audits. We had to find another way to move that forward. And what I would say is, just from a learning for everybody on this call, the issue was not our store managers. Our store managers took to smartphone auditing like a duck to water.
Yeah.
They use smartphones all the
Yeah.
time. For them, it was so much easier than having to find a pen and
Yeah.
write it all down and check their English or their local language. You know, the people that were challenged by it were often the middle management, because the middle management
Yeah.
for many years had been used to a particular
Mm.
way of working, and this was a big change.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully a few examples.
Actually, you answered what I was going to follow up on. That was like, I think this ties in with one of the points that we're going to talk about, the biggest challenges that people face with, the transitioning or the, digital transformation of their industries. And that was, how was the adoption process, and was there any resistance? And it's interesting to see that, when you talk about people in those areas where they're hands-on, it's not much of a problem, but then it's the back office, is that right? Kind of like the behind the scenes. Have you recovered from how much was that? How long did that take? For everyone to get used to the new system?
I think there's a traditional change cycle, isn't there? Everybody who's ever studied an MBA or an online course will know. And, it takes time for people to accept change, and you've got to give people time, but you've also got to provide that help and support. So, we initially were very keen just to make sure people did the audit. So the audits were scheduled on the system, and we spent a lot of time getting people to try and use the system. And the nice thing about technology is you can see who your bottom quartile are. You have the data, who's struggling. Now, people struggle to adopt things maybe for a variety of reasons. Maybe they didn't want us to audit their restaurant. That could have been the reason. Another reason could be they struggled with the technology. I mean, there could be any number of reasons. So what we did was we really went for, a root cause analysis of those people. And, if people were just not filling in the audit, I sent out auditors to spend time and take them through it to check there was nothing and a problem. We did a lot more training. So in the initial days, it was really about getting people just to embrace the change, to adopt the change. And then as the year has progressed, we've gone into the sort of next stage of the change, which is making sure now they follow through on it, that we actually analyze it, that we actually learn from it, that we are continuously improving in what we do. But we're taking it one step at a time. And, like any change, it's not perfection yet. It takes us on average 3 days, 16 hours and 4 minutes to address some of the issues. Now, if that's an issue that requires somebody to travel from Phnom Penh to Siem Reap to fix, that's perhaps not too bad. But if it's a major compliance issue, that's far too long. So, the nice thing about the technology is that you literally can come right down to how long is it taking you to fix a problem? And is that acceptable? And then you can deploy the resources, the financials, the support to constantly improve. The biggest challenge for me with change in any business, and technology is no different, is people give up too quick. And never give up. Never give up. Technology is never perfect. New technology will come along, new upgrades will come along, but never give up. Just keep pursuing.
It's interesting because it seems as if I have that sense of positivity from you in terms of transitioning, digitally. So I wanted to ask, earlier in our talk, you said that, you're pretty much hands-on person. So would you say that your work in terms of how you feel towards it and the experience of it, what is the difference then? Do you feel, what is the difference between the old ways that you were doing your work and now? I mean, do you feel more comfortable? Of course, there's no going back, right?
Well, I thought you were going to ask me a different question, actually, which was, am I very tech savvy? And I'm not, actually. I'm probably quite slow to embrace change, but
it's related. Yeah, definitely. I mean, like in
No,
terms of your
it is,
embracing
and I
that,
agree
and
with
I
you.
mean, like, yeah, like, do you feel more comfortable now? Would you say that it's a different but more a system of way of doing things that is giving you more insight perhaps than in the past.
Yeah, I don't drive change just for the sake of change. I mean, let's be very clear about that. But, I am optimistic. I do believe the world will be better next year. I do believe our business will be better tomorrow. And yet we need to do things to make that happen. It just doesn't come to you. You're not just blessed with that success. You've got to work at it. So, to me, it is about that constant improvement. And the thing about retail or F&B is it is about detail. It is about changing small things 1,000 times, not necessarily one big thing. So whilst I do spend a lot of my time, I'm the managing director on big strategic decisions. Do we buy this company? Do we enter this market? Actually, the things that are most noticeable to my consumers and the people that work with me are often the small things. And it's the small things that can improve things. And, those ideas don't come from me. The reason I spend time and I'm hands-on is to help to build my own knowledge to make those smarter decisions. But actually, the decisions and the changes that need to be made come from the people that work in the company, because they're the people that will tell you, if we relayed this counter in a slightly different way, I wouldn't need to keep walking from the coffee machine to the fridge to get the milk. It would literally just be underneath. That would be more efficient, and I would be able to spend more time talking to the customer and engaging. And it's those small sort of things that make a difference. And we've had exactly the same on our smartphone app. People were going, actually, if you just always scroll left to right, it is a more natural. And in one of our setups, you had to scroll down the page. It just didn't make sense. It wasn't a natural behavior that people who were using smartphones at the time were doing. I wouldn't have necessarily spotted that, but by spending time with the people, doing an audit with them, learning how they were using the technology, both myself and our technology provider could see subtle ways that we could improve the change to make it more impactful and more acceptable.
So now when you take a look at the wider picture of the markets and in your industry here in Southeast Asia, I'm sure a lot of people from outside the region want to know what are the major markets, what movements are you seeing in the past 2 years that you see that there's great potential and growth? Which countries are you seeing a movement that's distinct?
I mean, here in Cambodia, we are a relatively small country, 16 million population, only 21% urbanized. But we are seeing, with a very young demographic, a big growth in the F&B industry. And we've gone, for example, from 1 year ago having 2 international pizza brands to 7 today. So we're seeing a growth in development of shopping malls. We're seeing more of a growth in provincial cities. So, the F&B market here in Cambodia is very dynamic. And I think, in some ways it will be at the forefront of embracing technology because the populace is very young, and, young people by nature obviously are more exposed to technology younger and are more open to change. So I think you're going to find Cambodia growing super fast. This year we're planning to open 32 new locations here, including some interesting developments where we're going to work, for example, with PTT gas stations, where you will drive along the road, you will use your Hungry app to order your pizza, you'll arrive at your gas station, your pizza will be ready, you refuel, grab your Cafe Amazon coffee and head off on your journey. So, some very exciting things in the pipeline that we're working on, and some of these are being launched as soon as next month. So, constant growth here in Cambodia. The other market I'm very excited about, and I haven't been to for 2 years, but I'm going to go next month again, is Laos. Laos is a small market, but I think many of your viewers will know China and Laos have invested heavily in a rail route from Kunming to Vientiane. That rail route has now completed. It is open for freight traffic, but it will be open for passenger traffic cross-border, hopefully by the end of this year. There's been a big investment also in the road infrastructure, particularly transgressing Laos from Thailand to Vietnam. And, we've just opened in our second city in Laos, in Park Say in the south, to quite phenomenal success. So we've opened Texas Chicken Pizza Company and Dairy Queen there, and just launching in the last few days our Hungry app delivery business. So we're seeing growth in Laos. We think there is going to be more growth because of the investment in infrastructure. There's less brands there. It is, again, a small market, but a big opportunity. We are in Myanmar. Obviously, the situation in Myanmar is quite challenged, but we do see long-term opportunity for growth. In the short term, obviously, it's very challenged. And, as I mentioned earlier, I have experience of Vietnam and Thailand. It would be not too difficult to predict at some stage in the future. These would be natural markets for EFG to also be exploring and opening as we grow our footprint as well.
Okay, we've one last point, and that is companies that are listening to us right now who want to scale their businesses in Southeast Asia. What's your advice?
Oh, when you're talking about scale, I think you've got to consider a number of things. You've got to consider your people. You must have people that can grow with the business. And to me, that's always a good mixture of bringing in some talent, but also developing your own talent. You've obviously got to have the cash resources. And that is important. It's expensive to grow a business. You need to have that cash. And I think particularly the last couple of years, having cash resources has been critical to tie us through a pandemic. And then I think, we're talking tech here. Technology does help you scale and grow. And, we haven't spoken today about back office ERP systems, but that's another area we at EFG have been working on. You do need to be able to go from a small business to a business like we have today of over 100 restaurants and hopefully soon over 200. You need to have the investment in the IT and the technology to support you. Otherwise, you will come to a stage where your growth is limited. So I would say resources, cash, and technology are probably the three key areas.
Excellent. You know what? I think we should have another episode and to go into more details about the back office. We will try to do that in the future. But before we go, we have Techsauce rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
This little light, questions. So don't take it seriously. Okay. So the first one is rice or noodles?
Oh, rice.
Rice.
Yeah.
Okay. Flip-flops or shoes?
Oh, shoes. Bad feet.
Cat or dog?
Oh, definitely cat.
Oh, really? You're a cat person?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mountain or sea?
Oh, that's a harder one. Probably sea.
Okay. Marvel or, this is a bit nerdy, Marvel or DC?
Oh, that's a hard one because we haven't discussed, but I work with a licensing company, so I got to be careful here. Probably DC I'll go with. Okay. But I've upset my friends at Marvel.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting, DC. Tea or coffee?
Oh, definitely coffee.
Okay, Netflix or Disney Plus? Another.
Oh, Netflix.
iOS or Android?
iOS.
And lastly, sweet or sour? This is going to be interesting.
Oh, sweet. I'm a sweet one.
Okay. Thank you so much for being so sweet to us.
You're
Martin
welcome.
Darby, Managing Director of the Express Food Group. And hopefully we can talk to you in the future about more about the technological changes that you're facing in the food industry here in Southeast Asia. And we look forward to seeing and hearing more things from your company. Thank you so much. Sawasdee ka.
Thank you very much. Sawasdee ka.
Techsauce, sparking innovative thoughts.